as Imam Majid and others mention, is that when the Muslim community decided to leave and go outside of Medina, a third of the army returned back to Medina. So as they were going, there was around 1,000 Muslims, and as they got closer to the battle, Abdullah ibn Salul, one of the leaders of the hypocrites, he said, I don't think there's going to be a battle. And he said, we should just go back to Medina. And he started to leave, and around 300 people followed him. So you can see how demoralizing this experience was. Imagine you're going out, you're going to fight a battle, and then a third of the people who are with you, they decide to go back home. Now, this wouldn't have been an issue if the Muslims had won the battle. If you won the battle, then you say, who cares? These 300 people left, and we ended up becoming victorious. But as we know, the Muslim community lost in that particular setting. So there was a debate and discussion afterwards that if you had stayed, there was a better chance that we could have been victorious. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this verse and says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what occurred to you on the Yawm الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, here talking about asaba, musiba, the calamity that occurred on the day iltaqa. So iltaqa means gathering, or when the two jam'ani, the two groups came together. So this is it's describing a scene. Many times here in the modern warfare, we think of drones or guerrilla warfare. But here, two large groups of armies met. You can imagine this, that someone's on the hills, you have this one army come here and another army there, and this is how traditionally battles were fought. So these two jam'ani, they came together, these two groups, and says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whatever occurred then, فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. This is by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people were blaming each other, people were upset, angry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the musibah that occurred that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed it. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, subhanAllah. And there is here is the lam ta'deed, for the purpose that you will know who and distinguish who the true believers are, subhanAllah, who have iman. And this is significant, because as we'll see in the next verse, people say different things. One of the challenges in our life is that people say different things, but we don't know what they really mean. Can I trust this person? Is this person really sincere in their words? Except when the action, when the crisis comes. Then you know what is truly hidden in their chest. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We knew on that day who was truly the believer. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا, subhanAllah. And for the purpose so we know who the hypocrites are. The hypocrites, they're in the community. They were speaking and they were saying, we're with you, you're our prophet. But it only was when a crisis, when a battle occurred, then you saw the people distinguish themselves. وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ. And this is a very powerful section of the verse, where now we're getting into the battle itself. And one of the most beautiful aspects of the Quran is the quotes. You hear quotes from the munafiqeen, you hear quotes from the believers, you hear statements from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was something that was told to the munafiqeen. وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا قَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ ادْفَعُوا. So as the munafiqeen were leaving, one of the believers, he came to them and he said, come with us, please come with us, fight with us, or defend us if you truly have faith. And here in the Surah, they mention this name of this companion. His name was Abdullah ibn Umair ibn Haram al-Ansari. So he's one of the Ansar. And as they were leaving, he said to them, ittaqullah. He told them, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How is it that we went out for a battle and now all of you are going back home in the middle of the battle? وَلَا تَتْرَكُوا نَبِيَّكُمْ. Don't leave your prophet. You said he's your prophet. He's the prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you're going and leaving him, abandoning him. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ ادْفَعُوا. He said, fight in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you don't want to fight, at least protect. And here many Mufassirin, they talk about Abdullah ibn Maktoum. There's some companions, they didn't have the ability to fight. Abdullah ibn Maktoum was blind, but he would go out and he at least hold a shield and protect people. And then Abdullah ibn Salul, he said to them, مَا أَرَىٰ أَنْ يَكُونَ قِتَالًا. He said, I don't think there's going to be any fighting today. وَلَوْ عَلِمْنَا أَنْ يَكُونَ قِتَالٌ لَكُنَّا مَعَكُمْ. And if there was really fighting that's going to happen, then we'll be with you. So you can see kind of the wishy-washiness of the munafiqeen, that they're saying, yeah, we would have been with you if we knew that there was going to be fighting. Of course, they could have stayed and found out, but they had that fear in their hearts. And then you see the response of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud in the Quran, قَالُوا لَوْ نَعْلَمُ قِتَالٌ لَاتَّبَعْنَاكُمْ. If we really knew that there was going to be fighting, we would have followed you, we would have stayed with you. هُمْ لِلْكُفْرِ يَوْمَئِذٍ أَقْرَبُ مِنْهُمْ لِلْإِيمَانِ. That they, on that day, they were closer to kufr than they were with iman and faith. وَيَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. And they said what was on their mouths, what it wasn't in their hearts. SubhanAllah. And this is the contrast of the hypocrites. As you know, the different characteristics of the hypocrites. That they make a promise, but they don't keep it. They say something, but they don't actually mean it. They lie. And many of the Sahaba, they didn't just say, oh, that person over there is a hypocrite. They were worried that they themselves, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about nifaq in the Quran, that they were the subject of that. Wallahu a'lamu bima yaktumun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly knows what they conceal in their hearts. So brothers and sisters in Islam, we see that these two verses are very powerful and very deep because they deal with the crisis of the community. Here at this moment at Battle of Uhud, the community could have scattered. And really a test of any community, any institution, any masjid, any country, is that can they go through a crisis? And can they successfully go through the crisis and stay together? So after this crisis, after Hamza had passed away, after some of the archers had returned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the community was asking themselves, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reassures them, bi'idhnillah. This occurred by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we will see later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, don't think of those people who died in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as amwata, as people who passed away. Bal ahya. Verily they are living, and they're with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yurzaqun, that they're having sustenance. So don't have this, yes, of course, death and dying is sad, and we're human beings, and we feel that calamity, but we should also believe in the akhirah, in the hereafter, where these martyrs are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He is nourishing them. So secondly, we see in the crisis moments, people begin to distinguish themselves. That everyone is similar. Everyone is with you. Everyone's saying the same thing. We're with the Prophet. We're with Islam. But when the crisis occurs, then people's true hearts and intentions emerge. And then people many times are upset with the crisis, and they don't want the crisis or difficult moments to happen. But in these moments, you see people's iman emerge. And you see people's identity and resoluteness in terms of their faith and their understanding of the world, of peace and justice. But also in moments of crisis, you see the worst of humanity. And you see people do the most atrocious things. So the crisis comes for a reason. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after this Uhud, you knew who was really with you. وَلِيَعْلَمَ الَّذِينَ نَافَقُوا. And you also saw the people who did nifaq and who were the hypocrites. And lastly, brothers and sisters, we have to have a consistency between our words and our actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, يَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they said what in their mouths, what truly was it in their hearts. And this is important, that people are all constantly trying to compare our actions with our deeds and with our words. That we as an institution, as a masjid, as a leadership, we cannot say something and then not do it. People see through that. Whether that's children with their parents, or whether it's members here in the community, or whether it's part of a nation, that people see the double standard. They see the potential hypocrisy. They see that we're not consistent with our actions. Imam Maliki has a famous saying. He says, "La uhibbu al-kalam illa tahtahu amal." He said, I don't like talk except under his action. If you're just talking, but at the end of the day you don't do anything good, then we're conflicting with the Quran. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. That we believe and then we do the good actions. So we here as Muslims, we have to make sure that in our leadership, in our lives, that when we say something, we're truly sincere. And what is the alama, what's the sign of sincerity? Is actually that we implement what we say. That if we really say that we're the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we really say that we're a Muslim, then we have to put that identity and religion into action. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Assalamu alaikum.